Actually, this is the last agenda item for today. I'm not going to introduce the panel. It's a digital panel. I'm going to introduce the moderator of the panel. So it's our CPO, our Metalshub CPO. In our context, it's not the Chief Procurement Officer, but it's our Chief Product Officer. So please give a warm welcome to Sayalee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very tough slot, huh? Just right at the end of a very, very busy day. I have the honor of talking about a very cool topic, but also making it interesting, considering that you're probably tired. So bear with me. Yeah. Ricardo said digitalization is a buzzword, and while I do agree with him, it is a buzzword that's reshaping the very definition of our industry. Our sector is known for its physicality, heavy equipment, vast operations, really complex supply chains. But digitalization is no longer an if, it's more about the how. And who better to talk about it than the very voices from this industry who are leaders in change management and complex supply chains. Tom probably does not need an introduction, he's already here. A very exciting presentation from him already, but I will start off with our next panelist, Julian Gatzweiler. Please come on stage, join me. He leads raw material procurement at Outokumpu. You're very well aware they're a global leader in steel production. And Julian, after he joined, established the Group Transformation Office and has since then stepped into sourcing, leveraging his background in consulting and analytics. Welcome.
Thank you.
Next up, I have Dr. Harald Kolbe from Aurubis. You will recognize Aurubis as a world leader in copper recycling and production. Harald is head of digital innovation at Aurubis. Before that, he was at Lufthansa Technik. So he has over a decade of experience in digital transformation, another buzzword, I agree. And he sits at the cross-section of business and IT, covering the full spectrum from strategy to execution. So, welcome, Harald. At the beginning of the day, Frank, when he set us up for the summit and the expectations, he said, we are here to connect, we are here to discuss, but we are also here to challenge. And who better to challenge all of these very specific niche industry perspectives than Ernst Frankl? He is a partner at McKinsey, where he has been advising companies on commodity trading, hedging, and commercial optimization. Welcome.
Thank you.
I started off a little bit by saying, we are a sector very much known for its physicality. So I want, Ernst, you to kick us off by talking a little bit about the digital maturity. I mean, it seemed like from the previous presentations, we are very digital already. Are we?
Yes and no. I think that's a diplomatic answer. No, I think there are bits and pieces of the value chains that are digitized, right? Where digital technology has been around for pretty much a decade, right? And then there are areas that are strongly and firmly in the hand of individuals, their thinking, their Excel sheets, and their deep expertise and knowledge that they have built over decades. And I think you can't, I think it was the predecessor that spoke about it, you need to honor the past, right? You need to honor the things that are in the organization. But I think maybe here and there, the industry is still looking too much backwards and not enough forwards, right? So I think in terms of visionary statements and visionary digital projects, I think that's something that I haven't seen too much coming from the industry.
Why is that? I mean, we are an industry as old as time. Are we too old to change?
I don't think so. I think it I think it comes back to the pressure, right? There is commercial pressure from digital operating models that your customers and clients will have. There's pressure coming from decarbonization, from changes in regulation, and so on and so forth. And I do think that actually just creates additional pressure, and at some point, people come and innovate. And I think that's where we're about at that verge of basically that folks embrace this and then start thinking through what's the next step and how can we use digital, AI, machine learning, all these buzzwords in order to enhance our business model and to take it to the next level.
Right. So you're talking about external triggers, both adding pressure but also being the catalyst for digitalization. Maybe from the very industry leaders here, what's holding us back, or why are we not abandoning our Excel sheets? Or is that the limit of our digitalization? Do you want to take it, Julian? Maybe.
Happy to. Well, in regards to what's holding us back, I think there's a lot of sentiment in regards to the history and the expertise and looking into the past. But in reality, I think we're more and more recognizing the challenges of what is coming ahead and what are the expectations. So I think everything that we've heard today in regards to sustainability, compliance, traceability, visibility, all of this has to be married with our industry, which is all of our industries are pretty much in commodities. That means everybody has to manage their margins. And from that perspective, I think what has held us back maybe in the past is that we haven't put that much focus into business processes as we have into manufacturing processes. But now as the expectations on business processes increase significantly, we have to see that we actually develop these capabilities while still maintaining efficiency.
Is that where the most value is at, in your opinion, for digitalization?
Well, I mean, there are a number of different value drivers to it. I think some of them are simply required from a compliance perspective, right? Point one. Point two is sustainability is something that I think everybody acknowledges that over the medium and long run, it is a value driver, but at the moment, there are, of course, inherent challenges with it in regards to its overall maturity. But if you really want to be able to create not just value as what you do, but also how you do it, because the individuals that have been doing the job for 10, 20, 30 years, we also see a, kind of a talent challenge arising. And new digital tools and processes will make it also significantly more appealing to work in procurement. So I think a number of value drivers there.
I saw Harald nod when you started talking about compliance. Is that a big trigger for you?
Yes, of course. That's a big trigger for Aurubis. Of course, maybe some of you remember 2 years ago, the Metalshub summit here, there was something in the news about Aurubis. So since then, we faced a lot of these challenges building up secure processes. So efficiency is nowadays also a topic, but also creating digital experience for our environment, for our business partners. So I see also value out there. When I started 5 years ago with Aurubis, coming from a completely different industry, I saw that there was not that much digitally enabled. So we started almost from zero. And so, yeah, in these areas, I see the value. So in efficiency, in secure processes, fraud prevention in our case also, but also customer value.
I mean, you've been on the commercial side of things. Tom, how do you feel about that?
I think that the challenges are, well, I think one of the main challenges is attention, because, we have so many things in a company that needs to be done. So now everyone's talking about sustainability. 2 years ago, everyone talked about digitalization. Then now it's AI as well. So, you have a change of focus in companies all the time. And if you want to be successful with digital projects, you need attention, top management attention. So you need to make sure that the company is behind you when you do it, but you also need money and people to do it. Because otherwise, I can come up with a lot of very good-looking PowerPoint presentations and tell you like a perfect roadmap of how we make the company digital in the next 3 years. But if you don't have the funding and if you don't have the people to do it, then you're going to fail.
You talked about top-down initiatives, right? Like attention of the top management. We also talked about the people, and I completely agree. It's not just a technology story, but it's also a human story at the end of the day. When you talk about people, are we talking about resistance to change, or are we talking about lack of talent?
Who am I to judge the lack of talent? I'm not going to talk about that. But I think it's important that you have top management attention. But also, like, at least that's how I define my role. If I go to one of our plants, let's say in Hungary, and I tell them, so Paul Wharton, our boss, told me to do it, then they're going to not listen to me, because they will say, oh yeah, whatever, I don't care what he says. We are here in Hungary and we do whatever we like. So I have to go there. Of course, it's an over-exaggeration, but. If I go there, I need to come with a story that makes it understandable to them why we want to do it and what their benefit is. So, change is also, making it, create an appetite within the business units of why we want to do it.
What has that story been like? The story that you tell, from a group transformation perspective, Julian?
Well, I look at it in a quite simple way. It is also, and there was a significant amount of change management needed, right? I mean, raw material procurement was a very sort of established function, established ways of working, but not necessarily what one would describe as digitally integrated. So it required a significant amount of change, and that in the first place creates then always the concern from people, well, what does that mean, right? I'm an expert in what I do, and you're trying to tell me to do my job differently. And then when you then, however, take a step back and you explain everything that's coming at us, everything that has to be done now, all of the reports that have to be done, CSRD reporting, CBAM reporting, all of the things that are coming our direction, and they essentially create work. And we're not going to be getting a significant amount of people to be doing all of this work, because in the end, we're a commodity business that has to be lean through the cycle. So with that being said, it depends on how you frame it and say, I want you to do less of your administrative efforts and actually work in more of today's value-creating activities. And from that was actually a point that has been quite successful in how to frame it for the organization, because I'm not trying to take your job away. I'm actually trying to give you a more value-creating activity, and then showcasing of how that can work. And then, of course, naturally, with leadership, alignment on the budget, commitment on the budget, clear attention, target setting as well on the MPC side, like Ricardo mentioned. So those are the things that are all needed in regards to the housekeeping to get it done, but it's not straightforward.
I mean, that's a very constructive way of addressing that fear of replacement, I would say. But when these buzzwords are changing, we've got digitalization, we've got AI, we've got the next thing, how do you make that picture clear when it's so abstract in terms of value? Or is it actually very clear when you express it like that?
Well, I mean, in the end, procurement is a process, right? I mean, first thing you got to do is you got to know your processes, and you got to understand of what you're trying to achieve. So just, digitalization is a buzzword because when you don't know what you use it for. So I think that in the end, if you have a clear understanding of what your process is, the as is, and what you want it to look like, and to give that change story, and as well on how it all packs together into a result and an outcome with milestones that you can celebrate to not lose the organization along the way, it becomes all quite manageable and less daunting.
You want to talk about the milestones?
No, I think I want to talk. I think it's super important to create things, especially the beginning of the journey, that excite people, and that you have that are tangible, right? So you ideate, you create the vision, you then break it down into something that can be delivered ideally in 3 months' time, not 3 years. And then you create and you maintain that excitement in the organization. And I think that's super important and one of the key success factors. As soon as you have a timeline there that sits out like 12 months out, and you only see it at the end of these 12 months, then that's really difficult, right? It's difficult to keep people excited, and it's difficult to actually also maintain the noise that actually will build up ultimately throughout these processes. So what I always advocate is find tangible goals that excite people and try to put them in place in the next 2-3 months. Once you have a bit of a track record that you've done this 3-4 times, people will be more willing to accept a longer timeline. But I think especially in the beginning, you need that fast-paced, agile, dynamic implementation approach, because otherwise you lose people along the way, and that's a pity then. But I had one more thought, coming back to the very first question that you had around where is the industry. I think the industry in itself has a lot of an engineering mindset. Right? Fundamentally, that's where it all started, right? You didn't want to basically get the stuff out of the ground by hand, so you've built big machines and you built big supply chains and you manage that. And I think, in a way, applying that engineering mindset and this eagerness to discover and facilitate and optimize things into the digital journey, I think that DNA, if that gets rediscovered, moving away from just optimizing, putting costs down to this visionary thing, I think that will be that's a big mindset shift that will enable all these things. And that's then again linked to the how do we keep people excited by thinking about what's really going to solve the problems.
Fair enough. I mean, I wanted to quickly jump back to what Julian was also talking about, processes, right? You're saying there's a lot of industry mindset. We are talking about engineers who really try to optimize instead of doing manual labor. But going back a little bit also to Tom's previous presentation about decentralized processes, when you start from zero, like Harald said, how do you ensure quality, right? How do you ensure that you're not digitalizing inefficiencies?
Yeah, good point. So I think you have to start really with your analyzing your processes, with value stream analysis, for example, deciding if you're doing the right things in the right way, and then thinking about how to digitalize the processes. So not only starting, there's this saying with if you digitalize bad processes, you get bad processes will stay. So first of all, you have to do your homework in regards to processes.
Was that your experience, Tom, also at Salzgitter?
I mean, essentially, it comes back to the quality of the process, but also of the data you work with.
Absolutely.
So that's why I was laughing, and I did experience quite a bit of that in my career. But you have to make sure that also not everyone is allowed to define the process, because you have people that are huge experts on what they do, but they will try to complicate what they do so much that you can't digitize it at the end. But if you have some experts, and I've worked with McKinsey before as well, you have some people that come into a company and they look at the process, and then they ask very good questions of why exactly do you do this? It makes no sense, and you can then start to define a process from A to B, clean sheet or greenfield, in a greenfield approach. Because sometimes, it's good to have these experts, and it's very valuable to have people with huge knowledge, but it's not always best to let them define how you want to do a process in the future.
I think you've all mentioned very interesting things so far. So we are not too old to change. We can change, right? That's a very big positive. You say maybe it's not really a resource problem, right? We can find the talent to do it, and we generally have a good idea that we need to have a roadmap. We need to have the right milestones. Is there anything that comes to your mind that is holding us back other than this? Maybe in your past experiences, what are challenges that you faced in projects? Go on.
I think we're coming back to a point around what's the senior management attention.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of the companies also present in the room are listed, right? There's analyst pressure. There are very clear KPI, and there is no KPI at the end of the day that will say, oh, you're digitizing now, and that's why your valuation and your shareholder value is actually going to increase, right? It's like, oh yeah, maybe down the road that's going to happen. But immediately people are focused day to day on optimizing and squeezing ultimately the value and creating as much value as possible from what is existing there as an asset base. And I think shifting gears and thinking through how can we layer on top of what we do today something that adds value and also positions us for the future is something that some senior folks maybe don't have on top of their agenda. And I think that for me is probably one of the inhibitors as well, right? The tone from the top and driving this is, I think, absolutely essential in order to do that.
Is it the length of the projects where you lose momentum from the top?
I think it's...
I see Julian nod.
Yeah.
Too much SAP experience.
No, but I mean, it's always this, you got to remain persistent, right? And that I think can often be challenging when the business environment changes, when there is reprioritization of funds that were allocated or promised. That can, of course, then result into a loss in momentum and then possibly a less successful outcome. Or that along the way, due to budget cuts, the scope changes suddenly, right? In one way or the other. These can also, of course, then be challenges, right? That are often, well, that are not rare, to say the least. So if you have a real digital journey, this is nothing that you're going to be doing particularly when you're coming from an industry that is dominated by Excels and Outlook, as we have also seen earlier. So it's going to take something that a little bit more of a longer breath.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But let's say I've got a top-down initiative, it's losing momentum, but in a fragmented business unit, let's say regionally, I find that there is, in certain regions, let's say Asia, there's a very clear focus on digitalization. How do I bring this now back to the focus of my top leadership? Do you have advice?
Well, I mean, the question is normally of what's in it for them, right? Oh, sorry.
Harald seems to.
So what we did is to create mutual understanding where you want to go. So what you need in the beginning is a digital strategy, from my point of view. So that gives orientation to anyone, to everyone in the organization. So that's what we did. We built our digital strategy and then initiated several projects which pay in this strategy. So, and that helped a lot to bring together top management commitment, but also we collected ideas from like bottom up. The digital strategy was also inspired by outside in. So there were several ways how to fill the strategy. And then we created one target picture, one vision, and as well the pillars of the strategy. And then it was clear for everyone where to go.
So let's say we have a strategy and it's very clear, but earlier you touched upon also constantly evolving business and moving targets, right? How do you see KPIs change, or how do you see the business case for evolving digitalization change with the evolution of your targets?
So you have to be flexible so that you can adjust, and that can be possible if you not follow a waterfall model in implementing software like we did it years before. We set up agile teams and use agile methodologies. So, for example, in our software development, we follow the Scrum methodology, and then you have your user stories, and you can be flexible and change priorities over time. So it doesn't matter what changes next year or in 2 years, so we can we can follow that.
Everything you're saying, Agile, Scrum, it's all music to my ears, and my team probably in the audience is very happy hearing about this. You've done different hats also at Salzgitter, Tom, where you were in product management, but also an Agile coach. How do you see the approach of this industry to this agility?
I think, I mean, to put it really simple, when business intentions change due to markets. So like, let's say the market's going up, the idea of, I was working in a stock holding company, so the idea for us was, to keep the material a little bit longer, because, stocks were a good thing, because, they were increasing your cash, because every week you sold it later, you got some more money for it. But then, you have a crisis, and in the steel industry, you have a crisis all the time. So you have to change the way you need to sell material faster. So, you have to adopt to these changes. And I think the most important sentence was said by you earlier, but sort of just very lightly. You have to make sure that, what's in it for, your stakeholders, that has to be your top attention. So if, my stakeholders, obviously I have different stakeholders, but my management is, they give me the money and they make sure I have a job tomorrow. So I have to make sure that they are happy. So I always have to ask myself the question, what's in it for them? So if I tell them, markets are going down, so I can tell them, I help you sell the material faster, perfect. Very good to get that done.
Yeah.
I mean, you describe about things changing, right? And this is geopolitics, tariffs, everything that we've been seeing over the last years, COVID. But in reality, looking at our business, for example, well, the entire time we've been making stainless steel. So that means you're still buying the same stuff, and it still goes through the same process. You just have to manage a different environment, different risks. So, and it's much easier for you, going back to know your process, if your process is under control, you actually have clear visibility of your supplies, clear visibility on your terms and conditions, and where the material comes from. I think it's actually gives you also an opportunity to further de-risk the environment that you're operating in if you have a good and clear deployed digital process. Because if you have to manage this uncertainty by management by exception, being business as usual sourcing processes, well, then that just adds more complexity to the environment that you're in rather than the other way around.
We talked a little bit about agility and adaptability of internal processes, but what about your digitalization partners? I wanted to talk a little bit also about partner selection and how...
Fishing for compliments.
I mean, I've heard ringing endorsements already. We don't need to go that way. Mm-hmm. But I mean, Aurubis has moved in a different way. Let's say not more. Maybe for the benefit of the audience, what is good when we talk about make versus buy? Because they definitely have more budgets than us at Metalshub. I have investors in the audience. So let's talk a little bit about the make versus buy decision, and then maybe, Julian, you give your points for partner selection, but maybe let's start with Harald.
Yeah, so we decided to have the business people and the product owner in-house, and then buying the developers. So we sourced that out. So we have a service provider who do the development in our case. And what I also see big potential is the collaboration between big corporates and startups on the other side, because I would say they are opposites that attract. So they have different cultures, complementary strength. So if you see how startups work, they are open-minded, they are fast, they have a fail-fast mentality, and on the other side you have quality standards, resources, the use cases in corporates. So that's, from my point of view, perfect fit with different cultures that creates creative tension, could create creative tension, would help to make real innovation. And so one benefit for the corporate is definitely that you do not have to innovate everything by yourself. If you make a proper startup screening, tech screening, looking for trends outside there, and finding the right partner, that brings you forward kind of a leap. So that is really an engine for innovation if you partner with startups, from my point of view.
Thank you, Julian. Do you have a different perspective?
complementary probably to a certain extent. I mean, you have to say what's the right tech stack for what are you trying to solve, and buying commodities often sounds rather straightforward, but the pricing mechanisms aren't, right? I mean, a lot of the logistics concepts aren't. And then when you look at many solutions on a sourcing perspective out there, they have a hard time covering these complexities, or they could with significant customization. But then you realize that the person who's trying to sell you that software doesn't even speak your language, and then you tend to, okay, how much educational effort do I have to put in to then actually properly define the requirements, and how many more iterations is that going to take? So I think you have on the one hand the also expertise that's customized, targeted. I think integration of different technologies today has become easier than it was in the past. So therefore, having a more diverse tech stack is also more tolerable than a single solution landscape, as it maybe have been desired in the past. And then the point that it has to also be really user-friendly. I think it's a point of change management. And when fair endorsement, if we have some of our most senior category managers in the industry their entire careers and just before retirement now really enjoying the platform and to source via it, I mean, speaks volumes, then makes it much, much easier because if it's then even there, quite simple to use. And that's essentially what it is there, right? I mean, what is the reason? What's in it for them? Make their life easier. Category managers are not system administrators. They want to be out in the market. And the message that I give them is to say, I want you to spend more time in the market, not more time administering, sending back and forth Excels and emails and control whether things were put correctly into SAP. So that's what's in it for them.
Absolutely. I see a question on the top asking about the preference between best of breed versus one horizontal solution provider. And I think you answered that, or you at least alluded to it. It's not about whether I want a general system or whether I want a very industry-specific solution. At the end of the day, it's important to you that it speaks your language and you don't waste time in customizing it. Any advice, Ernst?
No, I think if I just look at that first question around the IT landscape, maybe that's one thing where I think if you run best of breed, your internal capabilities need to be much, much higher than if you just go and buy something that is horizontally and vertically and whatever integrated. I think it has so much more advantages, right? Investing into that capability to be able to manage this zoo of different applications, technology-wise, but also vendor-wise, functionality-wise, I think, and the data behind it, I think it's difficult, but I think if you do it right, it has an enormous amount of, and it probably is more cost-efficient at the end. At least that's what when I've looked at it for my clients, that's the conclusion that we've come through. But again, it comes back to the internal capabilities and resources, because that's certainly something that you cannot, or probably wouldn't want to outsource. You would want to own this because it's the backbone, your basically future digital backbone that sits there. So if you have the capabilities and believe in it, I do think for me, it's the preferred solution.
All right. I mean, it seems like we're already getting Q&A from the panel, but from the audience. But before we go to that, maybe one last thing. We've heard a lot about keeping the momentum going, selecting the right partners, selling what's in it for them. And I see one question towards, going towards what has annoyed you personally. But maybe let's have one round where you give the audience a parting gift. Tell them what are maybe common misconceptions or pitfalls to avoid. Or if you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be? Do you want to start, Tom?
Well, I can not give you a gift because of compliance reasons, I'm not allowed to. But I can tell you a party story because when I was doing digitization back at Salzgitter, I was called by our CEO back then, and he said, Mr. Schöler back then, of course, please come to Salzgitter. I want to pitch you an idea. And he came up with an auctioning platform, and I was very thrilled to be invited by the CEO, was very nervous, went there and I said, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, great idea sir, thank you sir, goodbye sir. Got some budget, got some people to do it. And then 4 weeks later, we did like a super fast project, created like a little auctioning platform. 4 weeks later, I went to Salzgitter Flachstahl, which is the steel producing part of the group, and I went to the managing director of it and said, okay, so Mr. Fuhrmann told me to do an auctioning platform, I need some material to auction. And he said, well, I don't care what he says, go away. And that was it. So he threw me out of his office, I drove back to Düsseldorf, being a sad self. So the party story I can tell you is, it doesn't help you to name drop and go somewhere and say, I have top management attention and I'm important now. Stand for what you have to say and, convince the people with what's in it for them rather than, I force you to do so.
Thank you. Harald, do you want to go?
So my advice would be invest time in your own learning, in your own education. So I'm a big fan of YouTube because there you can find content about everything and it's free. So I learned a lot how to fix the dishwasher, for example, but also how to make a successful marketing campaign using channel XYZ. So that's my advice, but honestly, I must state in these days that I'm also a big fan of ChatGPT, and I really use it as a personal assistant. And if you have the pro version, you can talk to my new friend on a daily basis, have real conversations, and that's very helpful. You can talk about everything, what matters to you in life, and maybe my platinum advice would be take a walk in the woods where it's really quiet, and then have a conversation with your friend ChatGPT about any topic. That's surprisingly powerful. That's my advice.
Thank you. Julian.
Well, maybe two things. The first would be sit together with your team and set your purpose and your vision, right? It's not just companies that have these, but you can also do this for your team. Say, what are we actually doing? How do we create value? And how do we want to work in 2028, right? For example, that's on our digital timeline. And then the other thing is, so this is more of getting your team on board. And the other thing is that you have to have a good understanding of, are we doing the right things? Because when you lead such a transformation, you need to have a significant amount of confidence that it's correct. And for that, you need to do your groundwork and know your processes, right? I remember, I think here Christian very much asking me all the time of when can we have a meeting and discuss of what Outokumpu wants to do next on digitalization. And I was like, well, we're still still need a couple more months until we've properly understood of what we're trying to solve for. We've gotten rid of the waste in the process, and then in the end said, this is of what we need to do. And then we could come with well-defined processes, clearly understood requirements, and can also say that what is then in the end done also not only is effective, but also efficient, rather than digitizing, then in the end, the risk of digitizing waste in your processes.
And what are you solving for? Efficiency?
Of course.
Always, that's the answer.
Many times.
Thank you. Ernst.
I think we've spoken a lot about excitement, use, purpose. Like you create something that actually helps solving a problem that people do have and recognize. I think what's often forgotten is that you need the momentum, right? I see a lot of my clients that do 1, 2, 3, 5 POCs or a set of POCs, proof of concepts, and they're successful, and then they go down because there's no new idea. And I think you need to manage that excitement where nothing happens, and maybe even disappointment, and then maybe you rejuvenate this and then you're back there. You need to bring it to something slightly more steady. So use the momentum, use the excitement to think very, very quickly about what's the next step and what's the next step and how you take it from there, rather than just relying on, hey, we do these 4 things and then we'll think about this. I think you need to connect the dots, otherwise you lose the momentum and you never get through something that's a little bit more holistic.
Right. I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about milestones. What would be short-term milestones in your opinion?
Short-term milestones in terms of KPIs or in terms of, I always like to think of concrete products. So build, and so I
But,
do.
I mean, your digitalization journey is never complete, right?
No, it's never, no. So what's the next one, you mean? Yeah, probably there's a good old matrix, right? There is urgency and importance, and you basically focus on these things that sit at the top
McKinsey
right.
answer. It's a very consulting answer.
But there is a truth to that, right? And you can add additional dimensions to it in terms of how much does it cost, how quickly do you get there, and so on and so forth. But ultimately it comes back to, do I solve a problem that the people in my organization have and want me to actually solve?
Right. We have some time, so let's go into the audience questions. I think you answered some already about the landscape. I think that's an interesting one for Tom, where you said, don't let experts define the process, so who should?
But I mean, hello? No.
He still gets 5 minutes.
I can talk loud enough without the mic, so no worries. I think the answer is simple, because ask the experts, but don't let them do the whole defining. Have a group of people looking at it and try to make sure it doesn't get overcomplicated. Because usually, people do things because they've always done them in that way. But if you look at it from an external view, you will find, and ask the right questions. So why do you do this here? And what's the purpose of this extra step? Sometimes you can abolish quite a bit of complication out of a process. That's what I was trying to bring across.
Nice. Victor wants to ask a question from Victor's from Metalshub.
Sorry. I think you mentioned something about momentum, and of course it's very important for every digital project, but I think also the topic of expectation management is very important, not only for your team, but also for the management itself. And perhaps just wanted to know from all of you your 5 cents on this topic, on expectation management.
I can give you an example from Hydro, because when we started this order intake project, the first slide I was on in every meeting was, this is what we agreed on what we do, and this is what we agreed on we don't do in phase 1. Because every time we started it, one of our managing people said, yeah, but what about prices? And we said, in the first step of the project, what we want to do is we want to abolish manual labor. We don't want to do automized pricing because the budget, I don't want to get into too much details, but we had a very low budget, and therefore we said, first things first, abolish manual labor, no pricing. So we had this slide on every time, because expectation management, they always come back to asking for more and more and more and more. So you have to make sure you say what you do, but also be very clear on what you don't want to do or what you can't do.
Maybe that's. I have one more.
Do you want to add? Go ahead.
Just like a 30 seconds. I think there is virtue in holding back a little bit. I don't want to call it sandbag, but say, we promise we're going to give you this, and this is the stretch. And I think what really creates excitement if people think they get something that's really something. It's not going to look very fancy, and it's going to do the job, but it's not going to be great. And then you deliver something that actually looks a bit fancier, then the gratefulness for this extra step is actually not to be underestimated. So I do think, and it's also good for the team in order to balance their workload, to be very clear about what's your must-have and what's the stretch target around that. And maybe sometimes you don't even need to proactively talk about the stretch target, but that will create ultimately excitement when you over-deliver there.
And that's always the case, right? Deliver a little extra.
Just a little bit.
A little extra to keep them excited. Another one from the audience.
Okay. That's following up on Tom's last comment about reduce manual labor. We did a very similar panel 10 years ago at one of our stainless conferences. At that time, the big topic was Industry 4.0. Yeah. Nobody talks about that anymore. And since 10 years, I go to 15, 20 steel mills, through the mills every year, and they still look the same than 10 years ago. So now the question is really, you digitalize everything, you have sensors, thousands of sensors on each rolling mill and whatever. Where do you really translate that into reduction of labor? I see the productivity at the moment. It's something we always have the man hours per ton of stainless steel sheet, for example. It's working. No?
It's not good enough.
Okay, good. All right. So, yeah. Now I have to tune down a little bit. So the question is really, do you have all the data, but when I go into an automotive plant, I see robots all over. But in a European, and I'm not talking now Chinese, in China sometimes I see more automation than here. In European steel mills, you produce your stainless steel, your aluminum, still like 10 years ago, or do you really see a significant productivity increase?
Yeah.
You see it?
Yeah. Come and visit our automotive plant in Hungary. It's incredible.
Probably Norsk Hydro is here. You know, I'm missing this a little bit in the stainless industry, and I'm not looking at you. I look at all your peers here, and here I see at the moment we are reducing headcounts because we are taking shifts out. I mean, that is easy, and that does not increase the productivity because the volumes are down. You know, so.
Well, I mean, the market has been decreasing, right? So you have to decouple a little bit in regards to what is within the production side, physically, digitalization, and then also the administrative processes. I think in general, we are, as mentioned earlier, engineering companies, which is generally then maybe not always over-representing business processes or IT capabilities. And from that perspective, I think that there is still significant potential. Right, I mean, all from a stainless steel perspective, the 4S, Lean Six Sigma, green belts, black belts, manufacturing excellence. These are all things that are extremely mature, I would say, in the industry. Making the most out of the assets we have is what we're good at. But then still looking at how do we actually run certain business processes end to end and really efficient. I sincerely believe that a lot of us and our peers in regards to process automation, even within established ERPs, can still generate significant efficiencies in how you operate. And that in the end then also creates the platform where everything comes next, right? Everything, I think a lot of what we've discussed now is quite unsexy in reality in regards to core processes. But if you don't get your data platform or anything right in regards to capturing the data points in a structured manner, then you're just wasting your money on AI initiatives, right? Because that's a garbage in, garbage out exercise.
I think you're making our CTO very happy, talking about data quality.
So can you honestly say that you know one stainless steel producer or a part of it, melting, casting, hot rolling, cold rolling, finishing, that is really 4.0 here in Europe? One. Because then I want to see them next week.
Me too. No.
All right.
There's still significant room for improvement. Let's keep it.
We are just a little bit over time, and I promised Frederick that we would end on time for the tour. So if there are no burning questions, I would say maybe connect with the panel. They're not going anywhere. There's a dinner, there's a party, and there's a tour, so you can find them. With that, I would say I would very much like to thank you for your engaging discussion. If there's one clear takeaway, I would say digitalization is less about the tech, it's more about the people. It's about building processes around our very experienced industry professionals and then sustaining the momentum. I won't make a Metalshub pitch, but I will find you later and pitch us. Thank you very much.